Maxwell, Caitlin Jenigan, Fernando Cervantes, Jade Reb, Denise Gentle, John Biddle, Catherine Dodson, Nicholas Lulinas, Martin Ratzner, Michael Erkler, Diana Ebony, Isabel Vasquez, Stephen Martin, Tony Salazar, Andrew Rivers.
Hello, my name is Tim Houchin. I'm the Executive Director of Hope for Restoration and the host of today's program. Welcome to Episode 5 in our series of programs created in recognition of National Homeless Persons Memorial Day, which occurs every December 21st. Since 2014, Hope for Restoration has organized an event each year called The Longest Night, held on National Homeless Persons Memorial Day. Due to the worldwide pandemic, we will not be able to conduct our traditional Longest Night event in public. Instead, we have decided to broadcast a virtual presentation that will premiere on YouTube and Facebook on December 21st, beginning at 7 p.m. Stay tuned for details on how you can view this event. This year's virtual presentation is made possible by our special partnership with Women Drivers Interfaith Group of Orange County. We give special thanks to them so that we could bring the longest night to you. This episode and others in our special series will also air on December 21st, beginning at 1 p.m. and continue up until the premiere of The Longest Night at 7 p.m. 2020 has been a very difficult year for persons experiencing homelessness. Record numbers of homeless deaths have been documented by jurisdictions across the state of California. In Orange County, more than 300 persons lost their lives without permanent, healthy, safe, and secure places to call home. It is our intention to raise a greater level of community awareness to these record numbers of deaths. Please help us by sharing this episode and others in our series with other members of your community. In episode number 5, we will speak with Dr. Sophia Herrera from the Hub of Urban Initiatives. She has performed research regarding homeless deaths, particularly deaths of homeless women. As a consultant, she has written reports for Los Angeles County in recent years. She will share her findings with us today. Our special musical guest, Michael RJ Roth, will share his thoughts with us about homelessness, and he will share his new song titled Streets of Seattle. We will begin our program by meeting Dr. Sophia Herrera. I am with Dr. Sophia Herrera from the Hub of Urban Initiatives. Today, she will share with us information regarding some of the findings from her research on homeless deaths, and in particular, the deaths of homeless women in LA County. Dr. Herrera, please tell us about yourself and what it is that you do.
So my name is Sophia Herrera. I am a clinical psychologist by training and a community psychologist by heart, I would say. I work in the field of homelessness. Have been doing that for about 10 years or so. I am the Director of Research and Planning and Policy at the Hub for Urban Initiatives. And I also direct the Office for Urban Initiatives at Fuller Theological Seminary. I am the chair of the Homeless Count Advisory Board for the Los Angeles Greater Homeless Count. Every year, been doing it for the last 4 years.
Now, you generated 2 reports for LA County in 2018 using data from point-in-time counts. Would you please tell us about those reports and the research that you performed?
I am part actually of a group that is called the 1 in 4 because we were noticing a trend as we were doing homeless counts regionally. As you know, the Hub for Urban Initiatives kind of takes the pulse, and we assist and consult with different jurisdictions in Southern California when it comes to homeless counts. And one of the trends that we were noticing is that the number of women and the proportion of women represented in the homeless population was going up. That used to be rare some years back. And when we started this collaboration with the American Roundtable, we noticed that 1 in 4 persons who were homeless were actually women. And that was about, I would say, 5 years ago. As it is now, it's looking more like 1 in 3 persons is a woman, and particularly a single woman that is on her own with no children. She might have children of her own, but she's alone on the streets by herself.
From your research, were you able to determine a reason for the increases in numbers for homeless women?
Well, people have asked that question. If you remember, we had a recession. The typical issues for women, sometimes women don't have a safety net once their spouses die. Sometimes women have been laid off for a number of reasons, and they have been able to get back on their feet. Sometimes an illness may put them out of work and also in debt because of the bills that they have to pay. So there are a number of reasons. It's not just the typical reasons that you will find. I'm sure those account for some of the women as well. But for the most part, women fall into homelessness because there's really no safety net for them. Right now, what we're seeing is that when a woman, for example, I know a couple of examples, when a woman falls ill and she can no longer keep up and the rent goes up, right? She can no longer afford that rent. And then she ends up on the streets. I can remember one case specifically of a woman who was sharing with me that when her husband died, he had cancer. And they had accrued so many bills. She could no longer afford the rent of the apartment where she was at, and she could no longer afford to pay the bills. The pension, if there was a pension, was already gone, and she couldn't afford it anymore. So that's one example.
Can you share with us some of the information from the LA County reports relating to homeless deaths there?
So one of the things that we did at Urban Initiatives is request data from the Los Angeles County Medical Examiner's Coroner's Office. That's a long name. Because we wanted to look at the data for what we call the other count. I think that you are aware of the fact that we count every year, and in some jurisdictions every other year, those persons who are to fit the definition of homelessness according to the federal government. But we wanted to see how that looked for, the data in the coroner's office. And it happens to be that in Los Angeles, the coroner's office has a designation for persons who are found on the streets as indigent, and they actually have a category for being able to assign those persons who they believe are indigent or homeless at the time of their death. So in looking at that data, most recently, we decided to look at the 2018 and 2019 data set that they had. And of the 1,700 more so of people that they had, about 1/3 or 337 women were represented in that group of people who died for that period. And they died of a number of reasons. Some of them died in the hospital. Some they were found in sidewalks. Some were found in benches, in alleys, railroad tracks, in encampments and parking lots, and so on. So we decided to pay attention to that. And one of the things also that we found in Los Angeles County, Black women are really unequivocally more overrepresented among women than any other ethnic group. And for example, Black women in LA County represent 9% of the total number of the population. But when you look at the data, 30% of the 100 women that happen to be Black were represented in that group. So there's an overrepresentation of Black women. And that also went for the city of Los Angeles. So what we hear about systemic issues that are not able to reach some of the most destitute women or some of the women that are in the most poverty is resonating with us after looking at this data.
Here in Orange County, many homeless advocates feel that we are not getting the information that we need that would help us to address the number of homeless deaths here. Please tell us, what kind of information is it that you require in order to determine causes of death for your reports? And where does that information come from?
Well, we kind of did our homework and we called the coroner's office to find out what kind of data they had. And they happened to have this designation, as I said before, of having a category for persons who are indigent or homeless or with no residence. And so they automatically enter that data or that category when they classify the death and the manner of death and the cause of death. So in a way, they make it easier when you go to the data set to be able to identify individuals who died the year before, and you can glean information from them that way. So if other coroner's offices were to do the same, if they were to identify the person as indigent or homeless as they do in LA, that probably will be helpful in being able to identify who those individuals are. Because there's no other way, really.
Dr. Herrera, would it be useful to include information regarding homeless deaths in HMIS?
That's an interesting question. I'm not so sure that I can answer that, but it will certainly be very poignant, right? When we find out that persons
well, it's all about
dying.
outcomes.
Right, it's all about outcomes. That's true. Yeah, I mean, that will require an integration of systems, right? That will allow, persons who are looking into HMIS to look into other county or state data sets and do the cross tabulations that way. So, yeah.
Often, when we think of research and generating reports, there's an image of someone in an office somewhere punching in numbers on an adding machine or a calculator. How much of your research is actually conducted at street level?
I have been on the ground, and I used to conduct the homeless counts here in Pasadena, where I live as well. So yes, I have knowledge on the ground. The situation is dire. When you go and walk into encampments, you can really see the reality and the conditions that people have to endure. One of the things that we've noticed is that sometimes women, for protection, once they're on the street, sometimes form community with different people. And when they form community with different people, they also expose themselves to assault. They're more, particularly for women, they're more vulnerable to sexual assault, for example, and to be at the mercy of others on the street. And you hear that, right? But when you walk the encampments and when you walk the streets, it becomes so much more real because then you can see that the issue of power and control that can happen even in an encampment setting. I remember driving by one of the encampments once in LA. It was under the freeway, and we saw a series of tents. And as we were driving by and I saw the tent shake. And then I heard some rumbling and so on, and it seemed like there was some kind of a fight inside the tent. So those are the situations that sometimes I think people who are on the streets are experiencing, in encampments. And I often wonder, how much domestic violence happens as a result as well. Sometimes women may not have experienced domestic violence in their lives, but once they fall into homelessness, they find a partner that they latched on to for protection, they may experience homelessness then, and more sexual assault as well. Sometimes domestic violence is the cause of homelessness. And there is a new study that I participated in with my partners at People's Health Solutions that looks a little bit more about a rapid response on COVID-19 during this time of COVID-19 in looking at the intersection of domestic violence and homelessness. So that's something that is out in, perhaps I can send it to you to review, but that's for survivors of domestic violence. And that's kind of a little bit off topic, but one of the reasons why women sometimes experience homelessness. And as I said before, we still have yet to find out how many of the women really fall into homelessness do so as a result of domestic violence. There are reports, for example, the Downtown Women's Center in downtown Skid Row, Los Angeles, has a needs assessment that they conduct every 3 years, I believe. And they did just one recently with the entire city. They used to do it just in the Skid Row area, but this year they did it with the entire city. And they found that a large proportion of the women who are on the streets have experienced domestic violence. So those are some of the realities that just kind of become more what can I say, real for you as you walk in encampments and you see the dire conditions that people live in.
There has been some speculation that point-in-time counts may not accurately identify some women as members of specific subpopulations of homelessness. Either they're not counted because they are hidden, or they are counted but not correctly identified in subpopulations such as being victims of domestic violence, homeless youth, etc. Are we accurately counting women in point-in-time counts, and why do some women wish to not be counted at all?
That's a good question. It's hard. Depends on the methodology that each continuum of care uses, right? I know that in LA, for example, there is a very concerted effort to get all of the areas covered, all of the census tracts covered. And so they covered 100% of those. This year it will be different because they had gotten an exception from HUD not to be able to do it as a result of COVID-19 in the surge. But I know there's a concerted effort to do that. So it really depends on the methodology of each location, and also the information that the continuum of care has in terms of the planning for specific areas. I believe, I think that women tend to be more hidden when they're younger, like with the youth count, for example, that they don't want to be identified with the older crowd and they want to be seen more as the so-called normal type of person in what I have seen. But in the jurisdictions that I have worked with, we try to be as accurate as we can. And we have seen the consistent trend going from, 25% to 30%. So it's anywhere between 25% and 30%. And even nationwide, I think the annual homeless count reports that HUD puts out now are reflecting women at 30%.
With the record number of documented homeless deaths across the state of California in 2020, do we have any idea how many deaths, by percentage or otherwise, that can be contributed to COVID-19 or somehow be related to COVID-19?
Right. I think that's yet to be seen in LA County because we haven't been able to look at data yet. We have to kind of request that data in order to be able to examine it. But also from what I've heard and what I've read, for example, the LA Times, I believe it was Gail Holland that wrote an article looking at encampments at a time of COVID-19. And she noticed that the rate of COVID-19 among homeless persons who were unsheltered was lower than in the general population. And in fact, that might have been a concern for people going out and counting. Because it seems like, because they're all already in the open air, that there may have some protective factor there. We're not sure. And so sending counters to count could possibly, if they unknowingly pass on the virus. So I think that the jury's not out on that. We have to look at data retrospectively, and we're trying to keep the pulse on things. We're trying to see what's going on. I think that, as you know, in Orange County, they were very proactive as well in housing people for a while with Project Roomkey, and that was effective. And in the city of Los Angeles, there was also Project Safe Haven for individuals who were impacted by domestic violence and they needed to get out of their situation. And so they were actually putting hotels and motels for a while in the hope for them to be able to be housed upon that program ending, which I understand is about to end this month. But there are efforts among some of us in agencies to see if the LA City Council could expand that. That was a project that was funded by the Office of the Mayor. So I think that the story of COVID-19 is not, it's not totally out yet. I think that we're going to be seeing the true impact probably next year as we begin to have a little bit more of normalcy, hopefully. And as we begin to get the data, because right now data is coming in, I would imagine, to the coroner's office, there's probably not enough time to be able to look at a whole cohort or a whole year.
Please give us a final message and your thoughts about our conversation today.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you for the opportunity to share some of our work. One of the things that we really want to highlight is the plight of women. And women who are on their own, who have no one else looking out for them and who are unsheltered. So I want to bring attention to that issue. We call them unaccompanied women. And I think there's a concerted effort from different agencies, at least in LA County, to make sure that these women are housed, that the interventions that we are applying to women also apply a gender lens. Just like when we look at veterans, that we also apply a veterans lens. That when we're looking at men, that we also apply a lens to men's issues. And when we look at youth, that we also apply a youth lens. And so we are seeing that we need to have targeted interventions for specific groups to be more effective and to be more real and to be more human in the way we outreach and we service so that they can get into housing and they get back on their feet. And if they cannot get back on their feet, that at least they died with dignity with a roof being under one roof. So,
thank you very much for being with us today, Doctor. We have been speaking with Dr. Sophia Herrera from the Hub for Urban Initiatives. All right, special thanks to Dr. Sophia Herrera for her sharing of valuable information with us. Next, we will hear from our musical guest, Michael RJ Roth. And Michael shared his incredible song Homeless Sky with us last year. And he returns this year with a new song, Streets of Seattle. Michael will tell us about his new song, and then we will hear it here for the first time. That's right. It's all coming up right after this message.
It's Michael RJ Roth. I know it's hard to spell my middle name, but it makes it easier to find me if you get it right. You can find me at easyheroes.com or michaelrjroth.com. And I ran into Tim last year, to you, and because of my song Homeless Sky. And then subsequent to that, I wrote another song called Streets of Seattle. I wrote that with Mike P. Ryan, and it's kind of interesting, because these two songs are about the same thing, but just very different takes, and it's interesting how, you can have completely different songs based on the same thing, whereas Homeless Sky was, the way I look at it, as more of a portrait of a person, this would be like, if you're a photographer and you took a picture of somebody sleeping in a doorway on a street, and then you panned back and took another picture of the street, So this is kind of the picture of the street as, from my impressions in being in Seattle, traveling around the city and, mingling in different ways with various people and so on. So especially now with COVID, it could be like the new pandemic. I think that it's something people think, well, that's not me, or thank God that's not me, but they don't think, oh, that actually could be me, and not realizing that this is something that can affect anybody.
Down at the Union Gospel Mission, street lights shine like golden torches, burning like a fire of hopeless wishes. You can look away, but not ignore it. With their backpacks and their knit caps, dressed in flannel, staggering, retreating from a battle they lost long ago and can't remember why they lost or when they finally surrendered. On the streets of Seattle, in the misty morning rain, a broken spirit leans on an old lamppost. hanging out like the Holy Ghost. I don't know if they can win this, existing on the dingy fringes among the broken bottles and syringes, looking for a life lost in the distance. On the streets of Seattle, in the misty morning rain, a broken spirit leans on an old lamppost, hanging out like the Holy Ghost. Beneath the laughter of a silver Boeing jet, hauling all those rich folks overhead, there is a dream that lies in stillness, waiting to rise from the dead. On the streets of Seattle, in the misty morning rain, a broken spirit leans on an old lamppost, hanging out like the Holy Ghost. Doesn't matter what you pay, he will never go away. He's here to stay on the streets of Seattle. He's here to stay on the streets of Seattle.
All right, that's it for this episode, number 4 in our series in honor of National Homeless Persons Memorial Day, coming up here Monday, December 21st. We would like to thank special guest Dr. Sophia Herrera for her words, and thanks to our musical guest, Michael RJ Roth. Now, don't forget our virtual presentation of The Longest Night, which will appear at 7 p.m. on December 21st. Please remember that this and other episodes in our series will broadcast again on December 21st, beginning at 1 p.m., and will continue right on up until The Longest Night begins at 7 p.m. For more information and to view this and other episodes in our series, visit www.facebook.com/Hope for Restoration. And don't forget that there's a number 4 between hope and restoration, the number 4. All right, we'll see you during our next broadcast, and thank you again for watching.
Down at the Union Gospel Mission, street lights shine like golden torches, burning like a fire of hopeless wishes. You can look away but not ignore it. With their backpacks and their kneecaps dressed in flannel, staggering, retreating from a battle they lost long ago and can't remember why they lost or when they finally surrendered. On the streets of Seattle, in the misty morning rain, a broken spirit leans on an old lamppost, hanging out like the whole